So today I'm going to speak about something that is really familiar to all of us, something that we think about or have thought about at some point of our lives, which is housing costs and housing affordability. And more precisely, I want to talk about how to make housing more affordable. Now, as you may know, housing affordability is a pressing issue in many urbanized societies, especially in large cities. And it's not a surprise that when you read the newspapers, you often see that housing costs, housing affordability, house prices, they are discussed almost every day in the newspapers, as you can see from these example headlines here. And just to give you some numbers on housing costs, here I have plotted the income share of housing costs in Helsinki for all renters in 2002 and 2021, and then separately for low-income renters. And here low income means that you're in the bottom fifth of the income distribution. And what we can see from these figures is that housing costs as a share of income, first of all, it's high for both groups, and it has been increasing. And what's striking here is that it's especially high for these low-income households. So low-income households spend more than 45% of their income on housing. And this is obviously a major problem, and we need to understand how can we make housing more affordable. Now, like any self-respecting student nowadays, I first asked ChatGPT for the answer. It's first saying that making housing more affordable is a complex challenge. I agree with that, but let's set that aside for a moment. Here, I'll come back to this. And let's focus on the first actual solution that it's proposing. It's saying that we should increase housing supply. It says that one of the fundamental drivers of high housing costs is a lack of supply relative to demand. Now, as an urban economist, I like this answer very much. If my exams were this easy, ChatGPT would pass them. But there's a lot to like about this answer. So, when we increase housing supply, we have more housing to go around for everyone. We have more affordable housing. We may even get ourselves away from this current economic slump by increasing housing construction and getting jobs to unemployed construction workers. So what's not to like? Surely everyone agrees with this solution. However, again, if we read the newspapers and follow the media, we immediately notice that there are a lot of people who don't actually agree with this solution. There are a lot of people who actually oppose the construction of new housing. So, for example, here a growing number of New York neighborhoods have stalled redevelopment efforts. A wealthy California city's epic fight to block growth, which is the growth of the housing stock, or that hundreds come together to protest against plans to build on Greenbelt. This happens in Finland as well. Here we have a couple of examples from Helsinki. People in Alppila are opposing new housing to their neighborhoods. People in Herttoniemi doing the same. People in Lauttasaari, current residents in Lauttasaari, are enraged about the plan of the city to add to the housing supply in that neighborhood. Okay, so what's going on? You may already guess partly what's going on, but let's think about this further. So one thing that might be going on is that people don't actually understand how markets work. They don't understand that if we just increase supply of housing, it's going to get cheaper. And here's an example of a recent article, or this figure is from a recent article in the Financial Times just a few weeks ago. And it's about an academic paper which was surveying people, trying to figure out whether people understand what happens to prices if there are any types of supply shocks, like increases or decreases in supply. And what's interesting here is that people are generally good at predicting how changes in supply impact prices, except when it comes to housing. So the first example here is cars. What is the impact of reducing the supply of new cars on the prices of used cars? The correct answer is that prices would increase, and clear majority of people got this one right. The same is true for another commodity here, which is grain. People even got more complex markets, right? Like labor markets. What is the impact of a large increase in the number of plumbers on plumbers' wages? Majority of people got this right. They even got right, what happens to prices if we introduce a free trade agreement. But when the question was, what is the impact of a 10% increase in regional housing supply and housing costs? Majority of people said that the correct answer would be fall. They said that either it wouldn't fall or prices could even increase. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, I think that one way to put it is that normal people are not economists. Or, well, that didn't sound right, but to say that normal people don't have economic models in their heads, so maybe they're just being more empirical about it. Maybe they're just observing what's going on around them and then answer these questions based on that. So here I've plotted the nominal house price development in Helsinki, and I've also plotted the number of new units that we have built during the same time period. This is from 2010 to 2020. So, and maybe this is something that people are thinking, we keep on building more housing, but prices keep going up at the same time. So it seems that supply doesn't work like it's supposed to work and like it's working in other markets. But that would be the wrong conclusion from the data, because the question we should be asking is, what would prices be had we not built this new housing that we actually did in the past 10 years? So that would be the counterfactual that we should be thinking about. And of course, the problem is that we don't get to observe that counterfactual where we didn't actually build those new houses that we did. So it could be that in that counterfactual where we actually didn't build anything, prices might be even higher than they are today. Another important caveat or detail when we economists talk about supply is that we have a particular thing in mind when we say something like this, that as supply increases, the price will decrease if all other factors remain equal. So we have this fancy Latin term, ceteris paribus, to say the same thing. And it's, let's take cars as an example again. It's pretty easy to understand that as we increase the supply of new cars, let's say we produce one additional car, it doesn't, for example, affect the quality of existing cars. So if a new Tesla comes out of the car factory, the car that you're driving, the quality of that car doesn't change. It's as pleasant to drive, the brakes are still working fine, and so on. It may affect the value of your car, but that's because there's more supply. But with housing, or you could say that housing is different in this respect, because almost always as we increase housing supply, all other factors do not remain equal. And this is because houses are always tied to a particular location. And whenever we build a new house or a building, we build that house or building in a particular location. It could be that we're building on green spaces or something. So let's imagine a residential area. Let's take the forest picture there. Let's say that there's a residential area close to this forest, and now we're contemplating whether we should be cutting down the forest and building new houses to it. If we do that, we're of course going to lose the forest. We're going to lose the green space that the current residents in the area probably value quite highly. Okay, so the quality of the neighborhood changes. And if people really value green spaces, it could be that the quality of the neighborhood goes down, it becomes less attractive for potential buyers, and that's going to decrease prices further. Okay? Now, this doesn't really challenge the notion that if we increase supply, prices are going to go down. That's going to happen in this example as well. But in other cases, we're not building on green spaces. Now let's think of another neighborhood where we don't have a lot of green spaces, or there are different types of vacant lots that we can build on. And let's say now that we densify this neighborhood. We build new houses in this neighborhood. This neighborhood now becomes more populated. New residents move into the neighborhood. These new residents have a demand for local services like restaurants, cafes, pubs, whatever, and also local public services. And this demand, in turn, may then increase the supply of these services in this neighborhood. The neighborhood becomes more vibrant, more interesting, more attractive to future residents and future buyers. So the quality of the existing housing stock in that neighborhood actually increases. And if this quality increases, or this quality effect is strong enough, it could be that even though we have increased housing supply, prices of the existing houses or the old housing stock in this neighborhood actually goes up. And then finally, what makes this interesting and difficult for us researchers is that the effects on neighborhood quality that I talked about are local, but often the price effects of new housing supply are actually citywide. Meaning that if you build something, let's say in the city center, that is going to have effects throughout the city. Perhaps the easiest way to think about this is through moving or vacancy chains. So let's say that we build a new apartment in the center of Helsinki. What's going to happen is that, of course, now somebody's going to move into that new apartment. And then that somebody's old apartment becomes vacant. And then somebody else is going to move into that vacant apartment. And again, that person's previous apartment becomes vacant. And then another person is going to move into that apartment. And what's happening is that we can kind of like through these moving chains or vacancy chains, the fact that we built something in a particular location in the center of Helsinki in this case, that is going to have these dissipating effects throughout the city. And the idea is that as people move into closer and closer to the city center due to these vacancy chains, actually the demand for housing goes down in these neighborhoods where people are now moving out to these newly vacant homes. And this should make housing more affordable in these areas as well. And this is actually something that we find with a recent paper with Kristiina Pratu and Oskari Harjunen. We have wonderful population-wide register data available to us where we can actually follow these moving chains. So we looked at what happened when we built a lot of new housing close to the city center in Helsinki between 2010 and 2020. And this is exactly what we saw in the data. There's a vacancy, somebody moves in, and very quickly, within a year, we saw that this vacancy or moving chains actually dissipated throughout the Helsinki metropolitan area. Okay, so I hope I've increased your understanding about the connection between housing supply and housing costs and the challenges that we empirical economists face when we're trying to study this connection. Thank you.